because I find a lot of feed sign around the red oaks and the
Yes.
chestnut oaks here. The bases of the trees are dug out and everything. Would you classify that still as a more of a woody browse, or is that something that's different?
Yeah, acorns are going to be, that's sort of a fat source. They're
Okay.
high fat, which is, that helps them put on fat in the fall, which is why they're going to those when they're falling in the fall. White oaks, all acorns in the white oak family, there's a lot of tree species in the white oak family other than just a quote white oak.
Sure.
And all the oaks in that family produce acorns that are lower in tannic acid than the red oak family, and so they're less bitter, and that's why deer tend to go to them first. If you've got white oaks falling near a red oak tree, deer are probably going to the white oak first and eat them first. Well, the good thing is white oak acorns don't last as long on the ground. Number one, they generally start put out a taproot and put that down fairly early and go ahead and store. They don't necessarily start growing a sapling or sprout until spring, but they'll definitely start putting out a taproot, and pretty soon they're unavailable. And those that don't sprout and kind of go down into the ground rot pretty quick because of those low tannic levels. Red oak acorns, on the other hand, and I'm talking about all in the red oak family, and again, there's a lot, they last much longer on the ground because of high tannic levels, high levels of tannic acid in the acorn. They last a long time, and they don't actually begin putting out a taproot until much later, and they're viable on the ground for a long time. So even though deer don't eat them first, what happens is, if you've got a lot of those, later in winter, so when other food sources are scarce and those white oak acorns are gone, now the deer will come back. And you'll often see this time of year, like you said, you'll see deer rooting around in the leaves underneath red oak trees or in snowy areas, digging through the snow to find those acorns that are still there and weren't eaten already. I remember several years ago, I saw a report, I believe it was in Mississippi, where a landowner had called the state wildlife agency and said, I've got 2 deer that I found dead on my property. I don't know what killed them. I'm worried about this. They came out and investigated. Turned out it was a doe and a fawn that had been standing underneath an oak tree when it was hit by lightning, and the lightning killed the deer. Well, the biologist collected the deer and did a full necropsy on them to see what was, just to make sure it wasn't some disease issue. He felt certain he knew what happened. It was lightning. This was in June that this happened. And when he did the necropsy on these 2 deer, they were full of water oak acorns, which is the tree they were standing under. Water oak is a common tree, particularly here in the Southeast, and I think many Eastern states. It's in the red oak family. It's a small acorn. Deer aren't really usually attracted to them right off early on. Those things were still viable, and deer were still eating them in the month of June.
Wow.
So that shows you how long they can last and how long deer can rely on them, for months after they've fallen on the ground.
That's incredible. It does seem like the red oaks last a little longer, but what's interesting, so I live kind of, on the brink, if you will, of like the ag soft hills and the steeper, eastern Appalachian mountains in Ohio. And I had never seen a chestnut oak in my life until 2017. I had never really hunted out east before, and I started doing it. And you generally, around here, they're an upper elevation tree. You find them starting right around that 1,000 to 1,100 feet of elevation. And the deer will not, in my experience, I have not seen deer touch those early ever, because they have everything else that they want. And you might know this, and I might, get to learn some more stuff here, but they'll hit red oaks, all the other white oaks, the chinkapins and everything else first. And then when there's nothing left, they destroy those chestnut oaks. It'll look like a flock of 100 turkeys came through a hillside. I mean, it's just unreal. Do you have any insight on those chestnut oaks at all as to maybe why they leave them alone? I've heard from some buddies that they really don't even mess with them in a lot of the parts of the South, which, it kind of makes sense to me. It's warmer down there. They have probably even less needs than a deer in Ohio versus Michigan, et cetera. But want to hit on that a little bit for me?
So I don't know why chestnut oaks, despite the fact that they're in the white oak family, aren't that preferred by deer, but they're not. We have them here in Georgia as well, and they are at higher elevations like you're talking about. We have Appalachian Mountains in North Georgia. That's where you'll find most chestnut oaks, and they're generally at higher levels than white oaks. And like you said, they're not a first preference acorn for deer compared to white oaks. Now, the strange thing is we've got a tree called a swamp chestnut oak, which looks very similar to a chestnut oak. It's got the big, broad, lobed leaves, the white bark. But the swamp chestnut oak is a species of floodplains of the coastal plain and lower half of the state. And those acorns are highly desirable. It's one of the best trees in my mind for deer hunting and planting for deer is a swamp chestnut oak. Now, why the chestnut oak? I don't know. I really don't know the science on that or whether that's been analyzed or what. But the fact is, yeah, it's not high on a deer's preference list like most of the other white oak trees are, and like a swamp chestnut oak is. The thing to remember, though, about all of this is that a deer's preference is always relative to what else is there. And it changes from area to area to area. There are no hard and fast rules from one region to another necessarily, and not even hard and fast rules from one year to the next at the same location, because it's always relevant relative to what else is there. I'll give you an example. Where I hunt in the coastal plain of Southeast Georgia, our most common oak tree is a water oak, which is in the red oak family. And in many years, that's the only thing we have. And deer will eat them right off the bat as soon as they're available, because that's what there is. So it's always, if you have a year where you have a white oak failure, but red oaks have a good year, you won't see a pattern of deer waiting to eat the red oaks. They're probably going to get on them earlier. So it's always all relative to what else is there.
It's been interesting the last couple of years here in Ohio. I honestly don't get a whole lot of white oak success, to be honest. Normally, by the time Ohio comes in, a lot of the white oaks have already fallen. We don't get a lot of them, but we have a lot of pin oaks, which is obviously the red oak. I call them fence row oaks. And then, we got the northern red, and they rain. The last 2 years, they've just rained super early into the later part of the season. And the deer just, you always hear, oh, white oaks first. And they're out there crushing red oaks, like it's December or something. So